Okay, so it is lesson 8. We're going to attempt this with me looking over my shoulder and trying to talk to you guys and type where I can't see what I'm doing. So we've got our everything store loaded. I'm going to start it without debugging. I'm going to try to run the SSL version if I can. So we set it up several weeks ago with a few local accounts. We created an admin account and we created a customer account. And they had different roles and permissions. Oh, did you hear that? Yes. Okay, so my site loads. And when I go to the login screen, I'll be able to log in with my local account, but we don't want to do that. Notice on the right, we see use another service. There are no authentication external services provided. So for us to enable this in the code is actually pretty simple. So we're going to have to do a few things. We're going to have to make some changes in Visual Studio, and then we're going to have to log into the Google Developer Console and set up a set of API keys. So we're allowing Google to have access to our store. So where do we fix this? If you go to in Solution Explorer, if you open up your App Start folder, in here we have a file called startup.auth.cs. So we want to open up that file. When we open this up, there's a bunch of stuff here created by ASP.NET Identity when we created the project and we chose individual user accounts for authentication. So it uses OWIN. So we can set up things like the default login page to take someone to if they try and access a resource they're not permitted to, how long an identity is valid for. So all this stuff is kind of here by default. And then if we scroll down to the bottom of this, we see some very handy code. So what do you suppose we are going to do in here? And where are we going to do it? You got it. So there's already code, pre-built code here for using a Google login. It's just inactive right now. So the first thing we're going to do is uncomment lines 61 to 64. So we'll uncomment that, and you can see the two parameters we're going to need to pass in order to use Google Authentication. So we need a set of API keys, and typically the API keys will include an ID of the application as well as some kind of secret key. So I'll uncomment those lines and build my solution. Once this is done, I'm going to go back and refresh my login page and wait the 800 seconds it's going to take to load. Now, obviously, this isn't going to work yet because we're not providing any ID and secret. So here's what we get now. You've enabled Google, but there's no ID or no secret here. So for a minute, we're going to fake this just to get this error to go away. Then we want to develop the real credentials. And then the other thing we want to do is we don't actually want to store we don't want to hard code the credentials here. Where should we put the Google API credentials instead? What file do we store kind of application level variables? Yeah, we'll want to put them in our web.config file. same file where our database credentials go. So for the moment, we'll hard code them here, but then we want to put them in the web.config file and read those values here. That means if we have to change the keys, we don't have to recompile the code. We can just change the values in web.config instead. So just for a moment in here, let's just put in any string values. We're not going to keep these here. We're just going to put them in here for a minute, okay? So put in any string value, as long as it's not empty. That should make that error saying the client ID is missing. It should make that error go away. So I'll just rebuild and refresh the login screen. So our login page should load eventually. It'll be old and gray by the time it does. So now you notice that message that there's no providers, that goes away and it automatically generates Google button, which is great. So let's try and log in. Okay. There is no Google Oauth client ID with the word test. So this is the expected result. So if our key is not valid, we're going to see this, right? So it is attempting to call Google, but failing. So we need to do two things here. One is we don't want to hard code these values here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create two variables in our web.config file. And then instead of hard coding the strings here, we want to read those values from web.config instead. So we're going to make that change. And then we're going to need to log into the Google Developer Portal and create a set of keys that we can then use to allow us to log in. Okay? And there's a few steps involved in that. So I'm going to close everything except this file. We really don't need anything else open right now. So I'll close everything but my startup file. And I'm going to go down and open up my web.config. So the section we're going to work with is here. App settings. This allows us to create global variables and then read those variables from anywhere in our application. So we're going to create two variables inside of app settings. I'll just put in a section here for API keys. So we'll do Google for sure. We may or may not have time to do another service. If we were going to do Facebook or Microsoft login, we're going to need separate keys for those. And again, we would store those in our web.config. So each key, if you see, they're just key value pairs. We're add a key. I'll call it, well, let's just look what the variables are called here. Client ID and client secret. So I'll call it Google client ID. For the moment, I'll give it a value of test. I'll make another one called Google client secret. And again, I'll just hard code in some value. So we'll need these. Once we have these, we could actually include any kind of Google API in our site. So if we want to use Google Charts, that's fine. We can set up Google Charts in the API console. We can use the same set of keys. Google Maps, whatever we want to do with any of the Google services that are available. So we'll replace these with I'll show you how to generate real keys in a minute. It's a few steps in the Google portal. So now we want to go back to our startup and we want to take out the hard-coded values. We want to read these values in from our web.config instead. Still not going to work until we have the real keys, but we should at least set this up properly. So what we're going to do instead of hard-coding it is we want to read those variables from our web.config instead. So we're going to use the configuration manager class. When I do this, I get a missing reference. So if I just make a reference to system configuration, my error goes away. So instead of hard coding the values, we want to read them from our web.config file. So if we rebuild and try again, we should have the same thing happen. It should show us the Google button, but when we click it, we're going to get that same error that the API key test is not valid. I just hovered over it and I accepted the little pop-up suggestion, which was just add a reference to system.configuration, or you can manually add that code that's on line 2. If you don't use the little hint and click, just add the reference manually. So this gives us access to read any variables out of web.config. So this might be useful. A couple other really common variables we use app settings for is if we want to store the file path of our application. Let's say we want to be able to upload files to particular directories. We want to do that from different places in the application. We can set up the upload path in our app settings as a global variable. And every time a user uploads a file, we can grab that path and save it, for example. So I'll build and go back. We'll make sure our Google button still shows up and that when we click it, it tries to go to Google and again tells us we don't have a correct API key. Once we get that, the work in Visual Studio is actually done. We don't have to do anything else in the project other than generate the keys in Google and copy and paste them into Visual Studio, into our web.config. So I guess one small thing we still have to do is add the right key once we have them. Okay, so my Google button's still here, and we get the same result. It's trying to let us log in through Google, but our authentication is invalid. So in order to set up these keys, we're going to need to log into the Google Developer Console, and you need to use any valid Google account to do this. If you don't have a Google account, you need to create one. I imagine probably everybody has a Google account by now. Doesn't matter what email address it is that you have. So I'm logged in, obviously, to Google through Chrome. So all you need to search for is just do a quick search for Google Developer Console. Or the link, you can see the URL right here, which is console.developers.google.com. So we use this for managing all sorts of Google products. If we're doing hosting with Google Cloud, we manage it through here. If we're setting up database to work with, if we're doing Android development, which you guys are going to, many of you are going to do later on, stick around for your third year, we do Android development. We'll use this for authentication, Google Analytics. Everything basically is done through the Google Developer Console. So we'll go here. So this is actually showing me. So here I've got a drop down of all of the existing projects where I've enabled Google APIs. If this is new for you, you probably see nothing. I don't want to enable it on any of these. I want to make a new project for the Everything Store. So if you see nothing here, you can click it, and then you should have an option for a new project. So we're going to create a new project because I have different API keys for all of these projects. I don't want to share them across projects, right? They may be for different clients. So each project needs to have its own set of keys. So I'm going to make a new project, which I will call everything store. So I'll click create.
What is the location?
Location doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, I guess I need a unique name. So within this one project, we will now have access to enable as many different Google APIs as we want. We want Google Search, Google Maps, Google Charts, Google Login. We can add as many of these things as we want. Okay, so I'll just close this. So now I'll pick my project, go to the Everything Store. That's just my activity. So I'm going to click on this dashboard link. And then in the middle here, there's APIs overview. So this is what we want. We need to enable so it says we don't have any APIs. We're not using any Google services in this project yet. So we can either click this link or click this one that says enable APIs. So I'm going to click it and it's going to show us all the Google services that we have the ability to add. Now they've changed this a little bit. The API we used to use, well, actually, I guess it's still here. So we want the Google Plus API. The Google Plus website is dead and gone. It was Google's failed attempt to build their own social network a few years ago. But I'm going to click on Google Plus API. I think this is the one we want. No. Sorry? Google Plus. So let's click on Google Plus. Well, it does matter because each API does different things. So this is the one we want for Google Login. So then I'm going to click Enable. So now the API is enabled for this project, and now this is where we need to generate the keys. So then we get this button that says Create Credentials. So again, I went to the dashboard, I chose APIs, I chose Enable APIs, and I picked Google Plus. And then I click the Enable button. So click Create Credentials. And now it's going to ask us a few things. Okay, so we want Google Plus. Where are we calling it from? We're calling it from a web server. We're not using front-end JavaScript. It's the back-end .NET code that Visual Studio generates for us that's going to make the call to Google. So we'll pick web server. We want user data. And then we have to click this blue button, what credentials do I need, even though we already decided what credential. So now it wants us to create an OAuth client. So it defaults to web client ID 1, that's fine. Now this is the important part here. Google needs to know once a user is authenticated, where do we send them back to? So we want to put in both a local URL as well as a URL on Azure so that this runs on both. And to get full marks on your assignment, I need to be able to run this not just locally, but on Azure. So first thing I'm going to do is just go back to my everything store. I'm just going to copy the link of my main local URL. So I'm going to put that in. And then on the end of my URL, it's going to be signin-Google. This is the path that ASP.NET uses. This is the URL that we want users to come back to after they've logged in through Google. So whatever your local host domain is, /signin-Google. And it has a sign-in-Facebook, sign-in-Microsoft if we're doing those. I'm going to click create, and then I'm also going to want to add my Azure domain with the same URL, /signin-Google. I got to go find my everything store. Make sure it's still running. So I also want my live domain /signin-Google, because then I can use redirect to either one of these domains. So in my second text box here, copy my Azure domain, put that in here as well. I'll just click continue here. It wants product name. This will just appear in the title of the Google login box. So I'll just call it the everything store. Okay. So here's the client ID. And we'll be able to get the client secret in a minute. So once I've done this, I can grab my client ID. It ends with apps.googleusercontent.com. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it into my web.config file instead of the word test. Web.config, instead of my test client ID, I have a valid Google client ID. Now, it doesn't show us the secret, but it allows us to download it to a file. So I'm going to download. They keep changing this. We may be able to see the secret. We used to be able to, but they're updating the console all the time. So I'll download the file. And it gives me a JSON object. Hoping my secret will be in here. If not, we'll have to get it. Okay, so here is my, if I scroll through this a little bit, I can see the client secret as well. The secret is shorter. I'm going to download that JSON file. I'm going to copy my client secret into web.config as well. You don't need to build because this isn't C# code. This is just an XML file. So I shouldn't have to build. I'll just go back here. I think we're finished here. I'll click done. It used to be if I clicked on edit, it would show me the secret. I don't know if it will. Yeah, it shows me the ID. Oh, yes, it does show me the ID and secret. So instead of downloading the JSON file, you could just click done and go in and edit, and then you see them both. So now we should be able to try this out. We'll go back to login. Whoops, Guess I got to do locally. Refresh. Now in Firefox, I'm not logged into Google. So if I click the button, I should get prompted to log into Google. In Chrome, I'm already logged into Google. So if I try it in Chrome, it should just authenticate me right through. We'll try it in both. So I'll click log in. So this is where that name shows up. It forced me, gave me a text box for the product name. So now it's asking me to pick. So I will sign in here. Put in my Google account. Let's see what happens. I'm going to try it in Chrome too. We'll see if there's anything else we need to do. There may be one other thing we need. Really hard for me to read like this. Can't see it. Origins and redirect domains must be added to the list of authorized domains. So I'll show you how to get back into this. I think we'll have to do this. This is fairly new. We didn't have to do this previously. Okay, so it did actually work. I've successfully authenticated. Please enter a username and click register to finish. So this is now going to add, it doesn't have my password, but it does have the email attached to my Google account. So it's going to add me. I'm now logged in with my Google account. Right? That was pretty easy. Uncomment the code, generate the keys, plunk them in. Good to go. So now I can log off. And here I'll try it in. I'll try it in Chrome where I'm already authenticated with the Google account. So now if I go to log in, I'm already signed in. Done. So it doesn't store my Google password. It has no access. As long as Google authenticates me, it will let me in here. So for your assignment, you're going to need to go through this same process. You're going to need to create a new project in the Google Developer Console. You can't use the same keys. You need to set up the 2 redirects, one to your local version and one to your Azure version. Create the ID and secret. Uncomment the code here. Read the keys out of your app settings and put your 2 keys inside of your app settings. And then I should be able to log in to your site on Azure using my own Google account. Like with another service? Mm-hmm. Sure, we can try Facebook. Facebook has a couple, it's similar. We have to create an app in the Facebook Developer Console. It'll give us an ID and secret. Facebook has a couple of other steps involved. By default, when you set it up, only you can log with whatever Facebook account you use to set it up, only you can log into it. So if Emilio does it with his Facebook account, I can't log into Emilio's site with my Facebook account. You either have to make it public or you have to give me access. Facebook may also ask you to create a privacy policy. We can try Facebook. I think we've got time to do it. We'll try it. So the first step is obviously going to be, let's enable the Facebook login. So we'll uncomment those lines. One other interesting thing about the Microsoft login, for the Microsoft login, and this is one of the reasons we have to enforce HTTPS. With Microsoft, when we add these redirect URLs, like we did here, we have to do this for all of them. Microsoft won't allow any plain HTTP URLs with their login. They'll say, we will not redirect to an unsecure page. And it won't accept that URL unless it's HTTPS. So that's one good reason why we want to force all requests to use HTTPS, because the Microsoft login won't work otherwise. Okay, so let's enable this. So Facebook, they call their keys app ID and app secret. So we'll do the same. We'll create two variables. We'll call this Facebook ID. Because we're going to do Facebook together, and it doesn't count for the bonus on your assignment. If you want the bonus marks, you got to do a different provider. Microsoft, Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn, up to you. So what's our next step going to be? Yeah, we're going to create Facebook app ID and Facebook app secret variables in the app settings of web.config. And if we rebuild the project, we're then going to get a Facebook button showing up beside the Google button. I can actually build right now. The Facebook button will show up, but it's actually going to give us an error because we don't have these values. These keys don't exist yet. So we'll make two more keys in web.config. We have Facebook ID. Again, we'll just put in a test value for now. Okay. So if we refresh our login page, we should now get a Facebook login button as well. And if we click it, it's going to attempt to call Facebook. It's not going to work yet, but it's going to be a start. Sorry, I just have to send an email for a password on this machine. Okay, so we're going to try, and hopefully we're going to get a Facebook login button here, which we do. So we're getting a not found. Because we don't have anything, right? That ID doesn't exist. So Facebook's response is a little different. Google's response is clear that the app ID is invalid. Facebook just throws a 404 when we send in a set of invalid keys. Okay. So we do need to log into Facebook, and then we're going to go to the Facebook developer portal. I'll log in. And we can just search for Facebook developer. Or you could just go to developers.facebook.com. Either one. There's your link. So we're going to go through this same process. You're going to get this main screen. And just like Google had a list of projects, Facebook calls them apps, not projects. So if you just go to My Apps, yours is going to be blank unless you've done this before. We're going to add a new app. So just like in Google, creating a new project. So I'll call it, this is a display name. So again, this will appear at the top of the little Facebook login window. I will then just click Create an App ID. Oh, this is going to be challenging. So we'll let Facebook generate our app. It's going to create an ID in secret for us. And then much like in Google, how we had to enable the Google Plus API, we're going to have to enable the login API. So whatever Facebook services we want to use, we have to explicitly name them. Okay, so notice it says in development. So this is what happens when your app is in development, only your login will work with your app. So we don't want to leave it in development. If you want me to be able to log in, we'll have to put it in production or you have to add my Facebook account. Okay, so here, this is pretty easy. Let's integrate Facebook login. So we'll click on this and confirm. And then we'll need to go and grab the keys and set up the redirect URLs just like we did in Google. And then we're also going to want to make it public so anybody could log in with their Facebook, not just us, into our own app. Okay. So we can put in a picture here. If we had a logo for the Everything Store, we could upload it. I think you have to choose a category for your app. So I'll just pick education. And we may have to put in the URL to a privacy policy in order to take it out of development mode. We'll see. We may also need the app domain. So here's our app ID and here's our secret. So let's grab these two values and put them in web.config. Copy. Show my secret. I've copied the ID and secret. Again, ID was the first text box. You can also reset the secret if you want to ever need to change it. So then I'm going to go down here to products where it says Facebook login. I want to click that, and that's where we need to set up the redirect URLs, both locally and on Azure again. So I'll click on my settings. I'm not sure why this is so slow. Okay. So we can, so by default, again, HTTPS is on. So we need to add our valid URLs. Bear with me for a sec. I'm not sure I've got the right port. Oh, 44. So I'm going to grab my local URL. / sign in. Facebook. And then I'm also going to put in my live URL with / sign in - Facebook. It's also going to be this. So I'll save these. Sorry? Oh, I don't think that'll matter. It'll be okay. I didn't mean to put in two. It's really hard to see looking this way. Okay, so it saved those changes. So now I'm going to try it. Now I'm logged in with one Facebook account. I should be able to log in now with this Facebook account, but not with a different one because it's in development mode. We'll try it. I go to log in. Now I'm already logged into Facebook, so this will hopefully just authenticate me right through. Right? So it has my product name. It recognizes my Facebook profile, tells me it's going to get my name, profile picture, and email. So if you're using the same Facebook account you set up the app with, works fine. Grabs my email address. Now what happens if I go to a private window where I'm not logged into Facebook? I'm going to try using a different Facebook account now. Log in, try Facebook. This is what I get when I use an account that's not the owner of that Facebook app. In development mode, and in development mode, I don't have access to it. So either switch to a registered user, ask an app or admin for permission. So here's the workaround for this. We're going to change this. We need some kind of privacy policy URL. I'm just going to put in the URL to the home page. So in my basic settings, I'm just going to grab the homepage URL of my live site. As long as it's some valid URL, I think this is acceptable. Facebook is encouraging us to actually have a privacy policy, which is a good idea. I don't have time to make a separate privacy policy today. So I'll just put it in here, in the home page. And then I'll try again to turn this development status to production. See if I can turn this on. If I'm able to take it out of development mode, then I should be able to log in with the different Facebook account. Okay, so it wants a category before I can be public. So I'll confirm that it's education. Hopefully my status will change. Their developer portal is not too speedy. Okay, so now the status is live. So I should be able to go back here and try again where I have my other Facebook profile, not the one I used to create the app. That error goes away now. And I can log in with any Facebook account. So most of the APIs don't require this. This is something Facebook has added. So by default, you're the only one who can access the APIs until you make it public. And to make it public, you have to define a category for your app, and you have to have a privacy policy URL. So if I push all this stuff to GitHub, which I'll do in a minute, I'll then just check that this also works on Azure. So I'll just go to my Team Explorer. It's possible we may have to add the Azure website's domain. It may work on locally. It may not work live without us putting the domains into the portals as authorized domains. So we'll see, because Facebook here has both of these have a place to put in what domains are allowed on this OAuth consent screen. So you can even put in a image here. So I may need to authorize, oh, it's already, should be okay, should work. Let's try it. So I will try both logins on Azure now that I've pushed these changes. Okay. So first I'll try my Google login, then I'll try my Facebook login. It won't ask me to register because I've already registered all three of these accounts. Okay, so we'll try Google first. And make sure it redirects me properly, and then I'll log out and try Facebook. So you can see from the status bar, it is redirecting me back to the proper domain. Just that our free Azure plan is really slow. So I'm logged in with my Google account. That's cool. Log off. And now we'll try Facebook account. I'm already logged in with Facebook, so there we go. So we're done. So most of the work is actually just done in the Google and Facebook portals. Create the project, enable the API and generate the keys, and put in the redirect URLs. Then we uncomment the code in Visual Studio, put our keys in web.config, and read those variables into our code. Visual Studio and ASP.NET Identity, it does the rest. Okay, so that's all for today. So what we want to do next week is get into building our shopping cart. We want to allow people to actually buy, add things to cart, change the cart, check out, save the orders, and if we have time, even pay for their order. We can manage it. We'll see how much we're able to do next week. Okay. We will have a short quiz next week on social authentication only. Okay, starting next week's class. Okay, just give me 1 second, Emilio. I just want to stop my